The ancient land of Proxima Centauri B. The twin suns of Proxima Centauri B hung low in the sky, casting an eerie, amber glow across the vast and desolate landscape. The ground was a patchwork of jagged crystal formations and barren, rocky plains that stretched out as far as the eye could see. The air was thin, and the atmosphere buzzed with a strange, electric charge, causing the crystalline structures to hum softly in the distance. It was a world where time seemed to slow down, where the laws of physics were twisted by the alien terrain. Every corner of the planet held a mystery, and for Ian Stone, this was the kind of challenge that called to him. Ian stood at the edge of a cliff, his dark eyes scanning the horizon with a focused intensity. He was a man who had seen a lot of the universe, and yet nothing had prepared him for the beauty of Proxima Centauri B. Its landscape was otherworldly, full of colors and shapes that could only exist in a dream. Massive crystalline spires jutted from the ground, their surfaces catching the light from the distant suns, casting prismatic rainbows across the barren land. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and the ground beneath his boots cracked with every step, the rocks seemingly alive with the energy of this strange world. Dressed in his signature black stealth suit, Ian was a stark contrast to the alien surroundings. His outfit was designed for both functionality and mobility, with sleek black material hugging his well-toned muscles, leaving his arms bare to the elements. The suit was equipped with advanced tech, tracking devices, communication gear, and a cloaking mechanism that allowed him to blend into his surroundings when necessary. He was a professional, a seasoned explorer and artifact hunter, trained to survive and thrive in hostile environments. But even for someone like him, Proxima Centauri B was proving to be a challenge. He wasn't here for the views or the alien wonders. No, Ian had been sent to this planet for a far more pressing reason. The Galactic Heritage Foundation, an organization dedicated to preserving the lost histories of civilizations that had long since vanished from the galaxy, had called him in. They had picked up faint signals of an ancient artifact, something powerful, something old. It was said to be buried in the heart of the planet, hidden in plain sight, but untouchable by all who had come before. No one knew what it was, but Ian was going to find out. He had been on similar missions before, tracking down relics of long-dead races, but none of them had ever felt like this. There was something different about Proxima Centauri B, a sense of mystery that hung in the air, a deep pull that made him feel like he was on the brink of something monumental. Going the wrong way again, came a voice from behind him, cutting through his thoughts. Ian turned, offering a lopsided grin as he spotted his guide, Defied, making her way toward him. Her figure was a striking contrast to the harsh landscape around them. Defied was tall and lithe, with smooth blue skin that shimmered faintly under the twin suns. Her dark blue hair cascaded down her back, a waterfall of midnight waves that caught the light and added an almost ethereal quality to her appearance. She was clad in a form-fitting black suit, much like Ian's, designed for the rigors of this alien world. But unlike Ian, she seemed perfectly at ease here, moving with the grace and confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime in these unfamiliar surroundings. "I thought I was headed in the right direction," Ian replied with a playful wink. "Trying to get a lay of the land, you know, so I don't miss anything important. You humans have the worst sense of direction," Defied teased, her voice laced with amusement. "The energy signature is coming from the eastern ridge. You're heading west. The only thing you're going to find there is more rocks and crystal formations." Ian shrugged. "Maybe I just wanted to admire the view. Not every day you get to see a planet like this." "We're here to work, not to sightsee," Defiad replied, though there was a playful smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Despite their differences, she had come to appreciate Ian's sense of humor. In the 3 months they had spent together on this mission, she had grown to respect him, not just as an explorer, but as someone who had a genuine curiosity about the universe, and that curiosity was something she admired. Ian and Defiad had been paired together for this mission by the Galactic Heritage Foundation, a collaboration between humans and various alien species. HFY, a member of the Xerians, a race known for their advanced understanding of alien technology, had been assigned as his guide. Though the two of them had come from very different worlds, they had found a rhythm together, learning to navigate the complexities of each other's cultures while unearthing ancient relics. It wasn't an easy partnership. There had been bumps along the way, but they had made it work. "We're not far now," HFY said, pulling out a small handheld scanner from her belt. She fiddled with the device for a moment before looking up at him. "The energy readings are getting stronger. This is definitely the right place." Ian nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the terrain ahead. "Lead the way," he said, falling in step behind her as she moved swiftly through the jagged landscape. They made their way toward the eastern ridge, the rocky ground crunching beneath their feet with every step. As they reached a crest, Ian's heart skipped a beat. Ahead of them, rising from the ground like something straight out of an ancient myth, was a massive stone structure. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The stone was black, but it absorbed the light around it, making it appear almost as if it were a void, a place where light went to die. Standing at the center of this block of black stone was a sword, its blade gleaming with an unnatural light. The symbols etched along its length were foreign to Ian, ancient and intricate, pulsing faintly with energy. It seemed to hum with power, like it was alive. "Well, that's not your average artifact," Ian whispered, his voice tinged with awe. HFY approached carefully, her brow furrowed in thought as she activated her scanner once again. "This artifact has been here since before the first colonization wave," she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "No one has ever been able to remove it, not even with advanced technology. It's like it's meant to stay here." Ian's eyes never left the sword. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a pull toward it, a sense of connection that he couldn't ignore. "Has anyone ever just tried pulling it out?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. A laugh escaped HFY's lips. "You're not serious, are you? The greatest minds in the galaxy have tried, and all of them have failed." But Ian didn't need to hear any more. With a determined look in his eyes, he stepped forward. He reached out and wrapped his fingers around the hilt of the sword. As soon as his hand made contact, the sword erupted in a brilliant blue light, casting everything around them in an intense, otherworldly glow. Arcs of energy shot along its blade like miniature lightning bolts, and the ground beneath their feet trembled as if the planet itself was waking up. The air hummed with power, vibrating with an intensity that made it almost impossible to stand still. HFY took a step back, her mouth agape. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath. But Ian, still gripping the hilt of the sword, felt only one thing: the power coursing through him. Something had changed. Something had shifted in the very fabric of the universe, and it all began the moment he touched that ancient weapon. The unveiling of power. As the brilliant blue light from the sword illuminated the desolate landscape, everything seemed to freeze in time. The air crackled with energy, vibrating around Ian's body as if the very molecules of the atmosphere had been disturbed by his touch. He gripped the sword tighter, feeling the hum of its immense power travel through his arm and into his core. His pulse quickened, not from fear, but from an overwhelming sense of discovery, of something greater than himself. It was as if the sword recognized him, resonating with an ancient energy that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right person to awaken it. HFY stumbled back, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her hand instinctively reached for her communication device, but she hesitated, as if unsure whether to call for help or simply stand in awe of what was unfolding before them. She had never seen anything like this. No one had. Even the most advanced alien technologies had failed to move the sword, and now, here was this human, Ian Stone, who had effortlessly lifted it, as though it were meant for him. I don't understand," HFY muttered, more to herself than to Ian. Her voice was a mixture of confusion and awe, the kind of feeling that only a true mystery could invoke. This shouldn't be happening. No one, no alien, no species, has ever been able to move it. Ian, still gripping the sword, felt a strange calm settle over him. The energy radiating from the blade was powerful, but not overwhelming. It was as if it was attuned to his very being, responding to his presence in a way he couldn't quite explain. He turned toward Wu, his expression a mix of wonder and determination. "I don't know what's happening," Ian said, his voice low but steady, "but I'm not letting go." "We need to leave, Ian," Wu said urgently, her voice rising in pitch. "If this is what I think it is, then you've just unlocked something we're not ready for. It's too dangerous." Ian shook his head, his fingers tightening around the hilt of the sword as he slowly lifted it from the stone. The ground beneath him trembled once more, sending small rocks skittering down the cliffsides. The light from the sword flickered like the pulse of a living creature, bathing everything in an ethereal glow. But to Ian, it felt like something more, something that was calling to him, urging him to wield it. "We're not leaving," Ian replied firmly. "I've come too far to turn back now." A low rumble emanated from the sword, reverberating through the earth, and for the first time, Ian felt the weight of its presence. The light dimmed slightly as the sword seemed to settle into his grasp, as though it were adjusting to him. But as the pulse of power within the blade slowed, something else began to emerge. Symbols, ancient and alien, began to glow faintly along the blade's surface. They were intricate, flowing in a script he couldn't understand, but they felt familiar, almost as if they were speaking directly to him. The hair on the back of Ian's neck stood up as a strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't just the power of the sword that was influencing him now. It was the connection to the very history of the weapon. He felt memories, visions, surging into his mind, vivid and unrelenting. In an instant, he was no longer standing on the desolate cliffs of Proxima Centauri B. He was back in a distant time, on a world that no longer existed, watching as an ancient civilization fought for control of the very weapon he now held. The images were fragmented, glimpses of battle, of warlords and kings, of civilizations rising and falling in the blink of an eye. But there was one constant, the sword. It had been passed from hand to hand, from ruler to ruler, and each time it was wielded, it brought immense power, along with unspeakable consequences. Ian staggered slightly, blinking rapidly as the visions receded. The weight of what he had just experienced settled into his mind like a heavy stone. He couldn't make sense of all the images, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary weapon. It was a relic of a lost age, and it held the key to something far greater than Ian could have ever imagined. Did you see that?" Ian asked, his voice shaky with the aftershock of the vision. "The sword, it showed me something ancient." She shook her head, clearly still reeling from the spectacle she had witnessed. "I didn't see anything," she said slowly, "but I felt it. The energy from that sword is unlike anything I've ever encountered. We need to get you back to the ship, Ian. This is too dangerous. You don't know what you've just unleashed." Ian looked down at the sword in his hand, its blade now glowing a steady blue. He could feel its power coursing through his body, sensing with his heartbeat, as if it had become a part of him. He didn't want to leave. He couldn't explain it, but the sword felt like it was meant for him. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the weight of 1,000 years of secrets, 1,000 years of power. And he couldn't walk away from that. "We're not leaving," Ian repeated, more firmly this time. "There's something more here. I can feel it. We need to find out what this sword is, where it came from, and why it's here." Wu stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she observed him. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Ian said, his voice unwavering. "I can't. Not after what I just saw. I need to know more." For a moment, there was a tense silence between them. Wu studied Ian carefully, her sharp mind calculating the possibilities. She knew Ian. He was stubborn, driven by curiosity, and a thirst for knowledge that could sometimes border on obsession. But she also knew he had a good heart, a heart that wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. And if that meant unlocking the secrets of this ancient sword, then she would stand by him. "Fine," Doe said at last, her tone resigned. "But we do this carefully. We can't afford to make any mistakes. The fate of this planet, and possibly the galaxy, could depend on what we find." Ian nodded, his grip on the sword tightening once more. "We'll be careful, but we're going to find out what this sword can do, and who it was meant for." With that, the two of them set off toward the heart of Proxima Centauri B, where the mysteries of the sword and the fate of the universe awaited them. The journey ahead would test their courage, their resolve, and their very humanity. But Ian knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. And whatever lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The hidden truths beneath the crystals. The night on Proxima Centauri B was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavier than any noise. The twin suns had dipped beneath the horizon, leaving the landscape bathed in the pale light of distant stars. Ian and Doe moved cautiously across the crystalline terrain, the sword still in Ian's hand, its pulse faint but constant. The faint glow illuminated the ground around them, casting long, eerie shadows across the jagged crystal formations that stretched endlessly in all directions. They were heading toward the heart of the alien valley, where ancient structures were rumored to lie buried beneath the surface, a place marked on Doe's scanner as a potential site of significant historical importance. But Ian knew there was more to it than that. The sword had already shown him fragments of something much older, something far more dangerous. He could feel it pulling him forward, urging him to unlock the mystery that lay ahead. The pair had been walking for hours, each step taking them deeper into the unknown. Ian could feel the weight of the sword growing heavier in his hand, its energy seeping into his very bones, as though it were becoming part of him. It had already proven to be a force unlike anything he had encountered in his years of exploration. Yet it was still just a fragment of a much larger story, one he was determined to uncover. "Do you feel that?" Ian asked, his voice low, breaking the silence. Wee paused in her tracks, scanning the terrain around them. "Yes, the energy levels are spiking again. Something is ahead. This area, it feels different, like the air itself is charged with something ancient." They continued forward, their movements slow and deliberate, each step closer to the source of the strange power. Doe's scanner was pinging wildly now, detecting fluctuations in the fabric of the planet itself. The closer they got, the more the sword seemed to react. The symbols on the blade were glowing brighter, and Ian's hand tingled with an unfamiliar sensation, like the sword was trying to communicate with him. Then they reached it. It wasn't just a ruin or a fragment of a forgotten building. It was an entire structure, hidden beneath layers of crystal, its outline just barely visible through the refracted light. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for two people to stand side by side. But it was unmistakably a doorway, carved into the stone itself, with intricate symbols etched into its frame. The same symbols that were now glowing faintly on the sword. This is it," Doe whispered, awe creeping into her voice. "This is what we've been searching for." Ian nodded, feeling a strange sense of foreboding wash over him. The sword pulsed again, as if responding to the structure ahead. His fingers tightened around the hilt, and despite the unease growing within him, he stepped forward. "Let's see what's inside." They passed through the narrow opening, stepping into the darkened chamber beyond. The air inside was thick with the smell of old stone and dust, the kind of age that could only be found in places long forgotten. The room was vast, stretching far beyond what their eyes could initially see, its walls lined with more of the same crystal formations that dotted the surface. But in the center of the room, there was something far more extraordinary, a massive, circular platform, its surface covered in intricate carvings. Ian felt his heart skip a beat. The carvings were similar to the symbols on the sword, but these were more complex, more defined. They covered every inch of the platform, winding around in an endless spiral. In the center of the platform was a pedestal, and on it, resting as if waiting, was another sword. This one was different, though. It was larger, its blade black, and gleaming with an unsettling polished sheen. Its hilt was adorned with more symbols, but they were far more intricate than those on Ian's sword. This was the source, the key. "We're not the first ones here," Doea murmured, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "This is no mere relic. It's a place of power." Ian stepped forward, his breath caught in his throat. The second sword called to him in a way that was undeniable, but as he approached, a chill ran down his spine. It felt almost as if the sword was aware of his presence, watching him, waiting, as if it knew that he was not just an outsider, but someone connected to its legacy. The glowing symbols on Ian's sword flared brightly, as if reacting to the power emanating from the second weapon. The chamber began to hum with an ominous vibration, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble in response. "Do you feel that?" Ian asked, his voice tight. He could barely make out Doea's response, her voice drowned out by the hum that was growing louder, more intense. "We have to leave," Doea said, her words urgent. "This is a trap. Something is happening. This place isn't meant for us." But Ian was already moving closer to the pedestal, his eyes fixed on the second sword. The pull was too strong, too compelling. He couldn't resist. Before Doea could stop him, Ian reached out, extending his hand toward the hilt of the second sword. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the entire chamber erupted in blinding light. The symbols on both swords glowed with an intensity that threatened to blind them, and the ground beneath them cracked open, sending shockwaves throughout the room. A deafening roar filled the air as the platform began to shift and move, the crystal walls vibrating violently. Doea grabbed Ian's arm, pulling him away from the pedestal. "Ian, stop," she shouted, but her voice was barely audible over the chaos. "We're activating something we don't understand." But it was too late. Ian's touch had triggered something ancient, something powerful. As the chamber continued to shake, the pedestal sank into the floor, and the walls around them began to glow with eerie symbols. The air grew thick with energy, as if the very essence of the planet was being drawn into the room. Ian felt a rush of adrenaline flood his veins as the sword in his hand flared with light. The ancient power that had been dormant for millennia was now awake, and he could feel it coursing through him. It was as though the sword had merged with his very being, and he could feel its power in every fiber of his body. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonant voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have awakened the Guardians." The voice was both a command and a warning, as if speaking to Ian and Doea in the same breath. The walls seemed to close in on them, the space shrinking as the ground cracked and shifted beneath their feet. Ian could feel the weight of history, the weight of the sword's legacy, bearing down on him. The ancient power that had been dormant for so long was awakening, and it was not going to let them leave easily. "We're not alone anymore," Doea whispered, her voice trembling. "We've disturbed something we don't fully understand." Ian's grip tightened on the sword as he looked toward the walls, the symbols now glowing brighter, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. There was no turning back now. Whatever this was, whatever had been awakened, they would have to face it head-on. And Ian was ready. He had no choice but to embrace the power that surged through him, the sword now a part of his soul. The Guardians were coming, and Ian knew this was just the beginning.